I think we have to be mindful of when people sit down and say, you must do this. There's no absolute in anything in life.
Yeah.
Someone telling you that you must do that with your child does not know your child. They don't know if that is going to work, if that's going to translate in the same way.
Hey, long time I want to sit down with a clinical psychologist. No, sir. VM is making dreams come true right now.
I wonder why.
Yeah, well, she always reminds me that I am not the perfect parent and I'm not being sufficient in sometimes. And I know that. I know that parenting is a tough task. And I often introspect and look at my techniques and wonder, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? Am I doing right by my wife and my family? It's a question that I ask all the time, trust me. So, I'm happy that you're here, who you have a lot of background into the questions that are asked all the time, How can we be better parents? Is there a blanket answer for that? Or is every single situation or every family different and need different techniques?
So every family is different and requires different techniques. I think you hit the nail on the head when you say parenting is tough because it's rough.
Yeah.
And there is no blueprint or foolproof method for how we parent our children. You spoke about introspection, and I think that is a key term right there. One of the advice that I give to families is the importance of being an intentional parent. And what do we mean by that? As an intentional parent, we actively seek to curate or cultivate the family that we want. And we therefore constantly reflect on what it is that we're doing and how it is being received. We're Jamaicans and we have a unique culture of raising children. I don't necessarily think it is all bad. And neither is it all good. There are things that we do that is really great, I think, as a people, but I think there are things that we also have to step back and reflect on. One of the things I think most of us have to come into an awareness of is that parenting is a lived experience. You parent how you were parented. And it takes a lot to sit down and really think about, how did my parents raise me? What were my experiences? What did I like? And what did I not like? What do I think worked? And what do I wish was done differently? I think we're stepping away from the era where people just have children. I think more and more people are really sitting down and thinking about what they want their parenting experience to look like. So because of that, we see more intentional mothers and fathers. I think we see more fathers being active in the landscape than maybe a couple of years ago. But even with all of that intentionality, we're gonna make mistakes because we don't know.
But you don't know what kind of child you're gonna get. You don't know what kind of children you're gonna get, and you have to parent the child in front of you. And as them say, 10 different brothers, 10 different minds.
Yeah. And there's something to be said about also being different at different stages, not just the children, but you as a parent. So even now, I always say that my kids are getting a different version of me now that I'm 40 versus when I had my first child at 30. It's a whole, because I've had a different experience. But I think something that is really hard, especially for moms, is just this feeling that we're not doing enough. And how do we really make peace with that or move past it or correct it?
So mothers carry a large burden of a responsibility of parenting across the world. I don't want to say we don't know why, but I think because we are naturally the nurturers, we're the carriers of the children, right? And men were often expected to be the providers who created that safe, solid space, and moms would be those who raised the children. Now we see more of a balance or people aiming for a balance. But mother blaming is a real thing, Tami. If your children don't do well, you're a poor mother. And if your children do well, you're a great mother. It's not as simple as that. Our children meet us at different times and stages in of our lives. They meet us at different financial stages,
Yeah.
different social stages, different emotional stages. And our children, while they are not necessarily a full extension of us, they do reflect what goes on with us. One of the things that we have to do as parents is reconcile the child in our mind with the child in our hand. What do I mean by that? The child that you hope to have and the child you actually have. And that can be very difficult for a lot of parents because each of us have our own persona and our own idea of who we are and what we want our family to look like. So do we want to be the super religious family or the highly moral family or the super cool family or the overly educated family? What do you do when a child comes into the mix who does not subscribe to what your desires for the family are? So it is important that parents recognize that we have to be honest about the child that we have. Because I know children that their parents have never spoken a harsh word to them ever, and they are well-balanced, amazing children. And I know children where their parents have never spoken a harsh word to them and they're rotten. I know children that parents scold them, beat them, do everything to them, and they still give problem. And I know some children that are terrified of being disciplined in any way. I don't think there is a checklist that you can go tick, 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 tick. And if you do those things, your child is going to be perfect because there's no perfection. None of us are perfect. You know, I think sometimes we have expectations of our children that are very unrealistic. You know, think of yourself as a child, Tami and Wayne. What kind of children were you? You were a well-behaved child?
I used to challenge my parents a lot. We grew up in a age where it was beating or spanking was
the norm of the day.
The norm. So my question to you is, this generation, is beating a thing of the past? Is it a conversation that is still had? Do professionals accept spanking or whatever as something that we still have, on the books?
I think every family has a right to approach discipline that way they see fit. And I think we have to be mindful as clinicians and professionals, quote unquote experts, or we tell parents what to do in their space. Because we have to recognize that what is effective in one space is not effective in the other. I think it's a privilege when I get to speak to families. And what I often say to parents is, let's talk about what the options for discipline are. Because I think our parents spanked us a lot or beat us a lot because they didn't know anything else. That was what they were raised with. So that is what they stuck with. I think we have become a lot more aware. So for example, I have 2 boys. My eldest, just send him to his bed. That's worse than any other punishment that you could mete out to him. It's like the world is going to pass him by. You know, if as a parent you spend the time to know your child, you know what really gets them at their core and what is an effective strategy of reeling them in. My youngest, send him to his bed too. But you send him to bed for different reasons. My youngest, if he's bouncing off the walls and I send him to bed, he wakes up from that nap a new child, more compliant, more willing to follow the rules or the instructions, while my eldest is really experienced as punishment, if we want to use that word. So if we know our children, we know the strategies that we can employ without having to go the route of hitting them. But I never chastise a parent or spanking their child. I think it is an opportunity for me to have an honest conversation of why that method was employed and what are the effects of that method.
Great answer.
And in that case, it also becomes a lot about the parents' experience and where they are and how they are even handling stressful situations in their regular day-to-day as well. It's such a nuanced thing, as we know growing up in Jamaica, in the Caribbean maybe. It's that we have different things to consider than I think that what we see on mainstream all the time and all the advice that's out there. And I feel like sometimes we have to take it, ingest it, and remix it a little because of just where we're from.
Make it your own. I think we have to be mindful of when people sit down and say you must do this. There's no absolute in anything in life. Someone telling you that you must do that with your child does not know your child. They don't know if that is going to work, if that's going to translate in the same way. I'm sure you are experts as parents in your own way because you have multiple children. But I'm sure you can attest to that each child is different. You understand? And what you did with your first child is completely different with what you do with your second child, because our children also have their own personality and their varied experiences of life. What one child finds to be amazing is not what another child finds to be amazing. What one child is fearful or cautious about is not what another child is about. So I think we have to, I say to parents, be very careful when somebody's selling you something about parenting, because you don't know what their resources are. You don't know what their constraints are. You know nothing about what goes on behind their doors, because sometimes we sell things that we don't buy, which is very unfair. You know, sometimes we put parents in a position where they doubt themselves to the point where they feel like they are a failure and they want to give up. We have to hold space for parents to have a right to engage parenting in the way that works for them. You know, in the same way that we all prepare meals differently, but still have the end product of rice and peas and chicken. It's the same way that we parent differently and have the end product of our kids, right? I encourage parents to find a community that supports you as a parent. Find a community that mirrors what your life looks like, and use that community to support you in the moments where it seems the hardest. Who can you call when you feel overwhelmed by your child? Who gives you that freedom or that safe space where you can be honest about what you're going through, or you can cry and say, you know, I'm disappointed in myself, or I'm disappointed in my child. Because can I tell you, parenting will humble you. Your child will be, I like to give, you know, your child don't eat this, and you cook it every day. I remember my youngest never drank soup. And I remember he was ill, and I made the soup, and I was determined he was going to drink the soup. And like I lock him in a lock, right? And I have the spoon. None of the soup got into his mouth. He had a gridlock teeth. All the soup was on me. All the soup was on him. He's bawling down the place. No soup don't get in him. And I felt like the worst mother, like the worst mother on the face of her, because I promised myself I would never force my children to eat anything, because I was a picky eater and I used to get forced to eat stuff that I didn't want, and it never worked out. Anyways, fast forward, we go to a wedding.
Drink the soup?
And I see my boy drinking soup.
Wicked.
I said, really no. You don't even know how this soup prepare, and you here drinking it up. And I make my good soup at home, and you don't drink. Children will surprise you.
But that is important to know, that even a clinical psychologist with all the answers by the books still face challenges in them also with them, particularly with them parenting. That's
I have
important
to ask you though, like, because you know it comes back to that whole, like, can you give us any type of practical tips for when we can see that moment where it's going to be a frustrating moment for the both of us, and we have to be in that moment the bigger person and regulate our emotions before we do this? How do we really in that moment like deal with these frustrations or these behaviors or these tantrums? I don't know where to start with that sometimes.
There has to be an awareness that you want to deal with it. Because some of us might feel like I am the parent, so I'm the authority. So it really doesn't matter what's going on with you, the child. If that's the type of parent you want to be, no one has the authority to stop that. But if you want to be an intentional parent where you really want to get across certain values and life lessons in your children, then when you get to those places of frustration, you have to step back and ask yourself, what are you frustrated about? Is it that you feel like you're being disrespected by your child? Is it that you feel challenged? Is it that you're tired? You know, because think about it. Sometimes we're harshest with our children when we're overwhelmed. And we are people too. We have things going on. We have sad moments. We have moments of uncertainty. We have our own struggles, internal struggles dealing with. Our children are not always aware of our struggles. And that's normal because they're children. So they don't care that we're falling apart. They need us to do something for them right now. And children like immediate gratification. So mommy, when all you need is 5 minutes. Maybe you have a headache. Maybe you have a difficult time. Maybe Wayne irritates you to the core. You know, whatever it might be, right? But you have to want to say, let me step back for a moment, because if I act in this moment, I'm going to regret it. But you have to want.
But suppose we do act in the moment and we do regret it. How can we, and is there such a thing as repairing that?
Of course. Okay. Because if you do something that when you reflect on it, it wasn't right, talk to your child about it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember my mother ever saying sorry.
Right.
You know, so you get beaten and then you figure out you never really did anything, and then my mother would say, boy, it was a beating for something that she never did know. So you did deserve a beating anyways. You don't want to do that with your own children. I don't want to do that with my own child. I don't know about anyone else. So I am completely okay with telling my children that I'm sorry. And I am completely okay with having a space where my children say, Mom, you know, you hurt my feelings. And it's not about, because I know there's a concern that our children have too many rights. Our children have rights, but rights have responsibilities. And a right doesn't mean that you, because my child will say, Mommy, you don't hurt my feelings. And I might say, sometimes your feelings will have to be hurt. It doesn't mean that because I hurt your feelings, I have an obligation to say, oh my God, your feelings must never be hurt. Because that would be a fallacy.
Right.
Because the world is going to hurt your feelings. So I need to give you an opportunity to learn to manage what to do when your feelings are hurt. Right? And you know, like I teach my children, you don't get to decide how I respond to something. Right? It's not that you must be comfortable with my response, but you can't tell me you didn't like it. Because that is teaching you to have a voice and be brave enough to use
I had
that
to do that
voice.
the other day. Jackson kind of had a little almost feisty response to me telling him no. And I just said to myself, you know what, this is him finding his voice, finding his opinion.
Pushing a boundary.
Pushing a boundary a little, and it's healthy in a sense. And I had to suck it up a little just to facilitate that aspect of me developing that
And it could
part
have
of
been
him.
very triggering for you in that moment too, because like you said, it's those things that make you feel like, wait, you disrespect me, and you have to reach back into your own. It's a lot.
Especially when we're in public spaces and there are other eyes and opinions, and we feel like we have to live up to that expectation of what I'm supposed to be as a parent. No one can tell you what kind of parent to be. I agree with you. Pushback from our children is not necessarily a sign of disrespect. It is a demonstration of their intellectual capacities and the fact that they're growing. But we also have a responsibility to see their boundaries within which you push back. You understand?
We should have a pen and write down all of this in the card.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if we could wrap up this conversation into 3 key points, what would those points be?
So, being an intentional parent. You're already a parent, whether you wanted to be a parent, whether it has been hoisted on you. Be an intentional parent. What do you want to be? When your children are adults and they reflect on their experiences, what do you want that to be? And remember that you can't force it. If you were horrible, your children are going to remember you as being horrible. If you were endearing and present, you're going to remember that. So what do you want your children to reflect on their experiences in childhood? So that's the first one, being intentional. The second one, which I think is so important, is the reconciliation of the child you hoped to have and the child you actually have. And really to reflect on that, why do you have those hopes? And how much does your actual child deviate from those hopes? And why, is there any difficulties with accepting your child as they are? Because there's beauty in difference. If we all were the same, the world would be boring. You know, we need everybody in this space, the comedians, the athletes, you know, the academics, the politicians, those that push back. You know, we want the loud children and the quiet children. So recognizing that we have to make that reconciliation and we have to accept our children as they are and support them where they are into becoming their best version of themselves. And finally, parenting as you are, having confidence in who you are as a parent. I say to people, most parents are good parents. Most parents make decisions in the moment that they believe will be in the best interest of their children and their family. Don't make nobody make you feel bad for how you choose to parent your child. Because what I want for my children are not necessarily what you want for your children. What I see as being important and valuable are not necessarily what you see as being important and valuable. So stand by your approach to parenting. Make it your own. It's good to read the books. It's good to listen to the experts. It's good to talk to other parents to see how they handle things. But at the end of the day, you have to create your own brand of parenting. Nobody else can do that for you. Because if you're trying to please everyone, that's when you're gonna fail.
Perfect. Love that.